Well, good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Richard Cruz, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Commander Natasha Burney. Today, we remember and commemorate the 73rd anniversary of the Victory in the Pacific Day. In the afternoon of the 15th of August 1945, Japan's Emperor Hirohito announced his nation's acceptance of the Allied terms of surrender as outlined in the Potsdam Agreement. It was more than 3.5 years since Japanese troops had invaded Malaya and bombed Pearl Harbor. News of Japan's surrender produced spontaneous celebrations in public places in Australia, the United States, and war-ravaged Asia and Europe. The Second World War was over. Japan's formal surrender took place on the 2nd of September when their delegation signed the documents of surrender aboard USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay, marking the official end of the Second World War. The war had spread across the globe, and there had been widespread death and devastation. Over 70 million soldiers and civilians had died as a result. In the Asia-Pacific theatre, Australia suffered over 9,000 fatal casualties, nearly 14,000 wounded, and over 21,000 taken as prisoners of war. The United States suffered 111,000 fatal casualties, with over 250,000 wounded, and like Australia, over 21,000 prisoners of war. Japan suffered over 1.7 million fatal casualties, 94,000 wounded, and over 41,000 prisoners of war. The alliance between Australia and the United States, which began on the Western Front in the latter stages of the First World War, became even stronger through our shared struggles during the Second World War. Since 1945, Australian military personnel have served alongside their American counterparts during the Korean War, the Vietnam War, and more recently in Iraq and Afghanistan. Today, we pay our respects to the 40,000 Australian men and women who died as a result of their service during the Second World War and who are commemorated here on the Roll of Honour, and to the survivors who returned home. We will recall the story of just one today, Squadron Leader Daryl Maxwell Sproule, Number 77 Squadron, Royal Australian Air Force, who was killed on the 16th of August 1943. We're also honoured to acknowledge Mr Alex McGowan, President of the Naval Association ACT section. As always, we welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors and students on behalf of the following schools. From New South Wales, Wirian Public School and Moree Public School. From the Northern Territory, Humpty Doo Primary School. Australia's Federation Guard is a tri-service ceremonial unit of the Australian Defence Force. They provide a ceremonial presence at civil and military events and during visits to Australia by foreign dignitaries. The Guard will now dismount the catapult party from the tomb of the unknown Australian soldier within the Hall of Memory.
Catapult party, halt! Catapult party, present! Out! Catapult party, reverse! Catapult party, rest on!
I invite you all to please stand and join in singing the national anthem.
Catapult party, attention! Catapult party, present! Out!
Australians, oh, let us rejoice, for we are young and free. We've golden soil and wealth for toil, our home is earth by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts of beauty rich and rare. In history's page let every stage advance Australia fair. In joyful strains then let us sing, advance Australia fair.
Catapult party, shoulder, out! Catapult party, order, out!
Students, you may be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, flowers of the forest. Wreaths and floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Squadron Leader Daryl Maxwell Sproule, DFC. Daryl Sproule was born on the 3rd of October 1917 in Hobart, the son of Albert and Irene Sproule. He grew up in the Hobart suburb of Sandy Bay, where he attended Hobart High School. On leaving school, he became an apprentice law clerk with Gattenby, Johnson and Walker solicitors, eventually becoming an articulated law clerk. Sproule also served for 3 years in the militia with 12 Field Company, Royal Australian Engineers. Following the outbreak of the Second World War, he enlisted for service in the Royal Australian Air Force. He was selected for pilot training, was awarded his flying badge on the 4th of May 1940, and at the end of the month was posted to No. 21 Squadron, RAAF, which was then equipped with Wirraway aircraft. In August 1940, the squadron was dispatched to Singapore before being redesignated as a fighter squadron and re-equipped with Brewster Buffalo fighters in early January 1941. Following the Japanese invasion of Malaya, No. 21 Squadron was kept busy escorting bomber raids and conducting fighter sweeps against enemy aircraft. On the 18th of January 1942, Sproule's flight was returning to base after escorting bombers on a raid. Encountering Japanese fighters, a dogfight ensued, during which Sproule was shot down his first enemy aircraft. At the end of January, No. 21 Squadron was evacuated to Australia, and in March the squadron was disbanded in March 1942. Sproule then became one of the formative members of No. 77 Squadron, which formed in Perth under the command of Squadron Leader Dick Creswell. Equipped with Curtiss Kitty Hawk fighters, it saw active service in the defence of Darwin during the rest of the year. Sproule had a brief posting to No. 1 Photographic Reconnaissance Unit, but was back with No. 77 Squadron when it was sent to Milner Bay in February 1943. During a raid by approximately 100 Japanese aircraft, Sproule brought down his second Japanese aircraft. The squadron moved to Goodenough Island in May 1943, and over the following months conducted operations against Japanese ground targets in New Britain. Before his departure, Squadron Leader Dick Creswell nominated Sproule as his successor, and on the 1st of August, Sproule was promoted to Squadron Leader and took command of No. 77 Squadron. The next morning, he led his squadron, escorting bombers attacking targets as Guzmato. On the return trip, he was leading his fighters in a bombing attack against Japanese shipping on the coast, when shrapnel from his exploding bomb damaged his low-flying aircraft. Just after 7 a.m, Sproule crash-landed his damaged Kitty Hawk in the water just off the beach, around 400 metres from the jetty at Lindenhofen. Leaving his aircraft, he made his way into the nearby jungle, where he stopped to rest. He was soon found by several local native youths, who disarmed him and took him to their village. One of the boys who had found him informed the Japanese of his presence, and Sproule had no choice but to surrender. After being bound and beaten with fists and wooden poles, he was taken to the Japanese base at Guzmata, where he was questioned and subjected to more mistreatment. One of the local witnesses later reported that Sproule was taken to a nearby location called Ring Ring, where he was made to dig his own grave. Completing his task, he was forced to kneel and was beheaded. His remains were discovered in June 1944, but it was not until early December 1946 when they were positively identified. His remains were reinterred in the Lae War Cemetery in Papua New Guinea. David Sproule was 25 years old. Posthumously awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross on the 15th of August 1947, the medal was presented by the Governor of Tasmania to his mother, Irene. His citation reads in part, Squadron Leader Sproule started operational flying at the commencement of Japanese operations in Malaya and participated in many fighter engagements in Malaya and Sumatra before being evacuated from Java. He consistently displayed exceptional skill and courage against greatly superior forces and was credited with shooting down one enemy fighter aircraft. On his return to Australia, he continued operational flying in newly formed squadrons. Throughout his long period of active operations against the enemy, Squadron Leader Sproule's sustained gallantry and devotion to duty have been a most valuable asset to his squadron. His death was later investigated as a war crime. The officer responsible was tried and found guilty of his murder and was executed in 1949. David Sproule's name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my left, among almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. His photograph is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Squadron Leader David Maxwell Sproule, DFC, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Uniform party, shoulder, arms.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Uniform party, present, arms. Uniform party, shoulder, arms.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget.
Uniform party, outwards, turn. Uniform party, quick, march.
We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes this evening's last post ceremony. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.